Three, two, one.
William, keep smiling, darling.
Having reviewed the data, the pollsters have now presented their findings. Asked if the royal family were out of touch with ordinary people.
The Prime Minister has a new nickname, King Tony.
All right, Shot Deck. Here we go. We got another Shot Talk for you. And of course, listen, we couldn't let this series end without returning to talk to Adriana Goldman about The Crown. So here we are talking about The Crown, season 6, the end of it, right? I mean, this is it. We're done. At least this is like, I watched the last episode and cried and thought, this is such a fitting, incredible sort of ending. And Adriana, who obviously the show is on Netflix and it's probably the most lauded show in the last 25 years on television. And obviously, as you know from previous Shot Talks, my favorite show on television. And I love talking to Adriano about it. And Adriano shot the first episode. He shot many, the most of anyone in between. And he shot the last episode. So it's all bookends with our cinematographer that we're talking to today, Adriana Goldman. So The Crown is over. First, before we jump into some imagery and talk about it and deep dive, what does that feel like? When I think about 8 years of your life, or maybe longer, from the time it started to like the time it gets put into the screens, what does that feel like to end the show?
Larry, I mean, of course, there's a little bit of nostalgia, and I especially, I mean, the last one, and how great we all felt when we got to know that Stephen Daldry was coming for the last one. So we had Stephen on for a few episodes on seasons 1 and 2, and then he disappeared. He's a theater man, so he's always busy doing, theater plays and etc. So and then he stayed with us as an executive producer throughout 6 seasons. So we always, had him somehow around us. But it was truly a joy because, like you said, I mean, not only the fact that I did the first and the last, but I did both EPs 101 and 610 with Daldry. So it's like full circle for me and him. And he was, I mean, I really love working with him. And he's, he brings such a specific, such a Daldry flavor, as I used to, say, with his choreography and the way he deals with the cast and the crew. And you think that someone as experienced as he is would just come in a kind of a lazy mode, you know what I mean? Like, I've done this before, I know how to do it, I know the crew, I know the cast, but it was completely the opposite. He came, I mean, in such a great form, with a lot of energy, with a lot of great ideas, and, his usual enthusiasm. And there's a very specific way of dealing with Daldry, and he's constantly asking for more and challenging you to deliver more. And I don't know, it's very special. I mean, I really enjoy working with him. But at the same time, I mean, the privilege of being of worked with several different directors throughout 6 seasons. I mean, Daldry himself and Philip Martin, Ben Karen, Jessica Hobbs, Paul Whittington. I mean, it was everyone with their own kind of, methodology and approach and tastes. I think that's part of the privilege of being a DOP. It's, being able to work with different artists and different mindsets. And I repeat myself a few times when I say changed my career and my life. And it's absolutely true. I mean, that was not exactly, I think, it wasn't my first job in the UK. It wasn't my first period project, but like the fact that I could exercise, my job and my work, my artistry and my craft throughout 8 seasons, and the progression throughout time. We started in the early 50s and we ended up in the early 2000s with Diana, and like Imelda playing like an older queen or whatever. It was just like such an interesting arc to cover. And also coming from where I come, the whole thing about trying to be faithful and to such a iconic story and the history behind the royal family, and the fairy tale sort of aspect behind all this, and the fact that we resisted to the glossy, again repeating myself, fairy tale sort of life side of the story. We kept ourselves, like, we guided ourselves through 6 seasons, trying to be realistic and approachable, trying to humanize the characters as much as we could and make them believable and more like human beings than just this kind of a mythical family that you rarely see, that leave behind castle, big walls and inside palaces. And anyway, it was just amazing, an amazing journey. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because season 6, in many ways, part of season 5 too, it finally caught up to my experience with the royal family as an American and seeing them on television. Obviously, 6 deals with Diana's death and the aftermath, but also, and let's talk a bit, and maybe using episode 10, which is Stephen Daldry's episode, and as we talked about, he's only directed 5 of the episodes, but all 5 you shot for him.
Yep.
And talk a little bit about that episode 10, and maybe in talking about it specifically, talk to me a little bit about how you changed over these 8 years in terms of maybe your approach to the show, besides the specifics and what you were intending to do with season 6, as you have in all the other previous seasons. But also, I have one specific question about the episode 10, because it's so unique. Was that written when you began the season, or did it sort of come out of Elizabeth's death and all the rest of it? Because it's really an incredibly touching episode that obviously, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing on its own, even because it deals with her own mortality, but also her legacy, and then also the legacy of the show, because you bring back characters, you bring back basically every version of her in that episode. Talk to me a little bit about the script, and did it adjust itself while you were making it with the real death of Elizabeth and all the rest of it?
It's funny you mentioned this. We were at the very beginning of the season when I was still working with Christian Schauhau on episodes 2, 3, and 4. On just literally before the first day of principal photography for the entire season, we were in Barcelona. So we used Barcelona for Paris, especially for episodes 2, 3, and 4. And we were in Barcelona waiting, literally. We were about to start shooting on the next day, and we get the news that the Queen had just died in the UK. So we had to shut down in full respect. I think it didn't make any sense to carry on shooting, so we had to stop. We couldn't shoot Barcelona. We had to move to Palma, where we were supposed to be like only 2 weeks later. So we had to create this kind of a mourning hiatus in tribute to the real Queen that had just died. So Netflix got involved, Left Bank and Peter Morgan. We all agreed that we had to stop for a couple of weeks in the sign of respect and mourn with the nation. But anyway, that aside, we was kind of new to us, and to me especially, after reading every single script throughout 6 seasons, that specifically for the aftermath, Ep 4, Peter came with a little bit of magic realism, embracing, I'm going to call them the ghosts, right? So when Charles is coming back after going to Paris to retrieve Diana's body and bring it back to the UK, there's a conversation in the plane or on the plane with him and her image or her ghost. So that was kind of a unique thing on The Crown. We never felt that magic realism or any sort of fantasy was part of the show or should be part of the show. So that was a surprise in itself. And then when we were prepping for Ep 10, the idea of bringing the 3, or putting together the 3 queens, was kind of possible then. I think after embracing what we had to embrace on F4, just walking away or stepping aside of the strict realism that we embraced for 5 seasons or 6 seasons almost. The idea of having the 3 queens and kind of stepping away from the so kind of realistic approach that we had felt just really refreshing anyway.
That episode, when it started the season, the idea that episode 10 starts with her on her nearly 80th birthday, and they're saying, we have to make plans for your death, and do you want to like be involved? And Prince Philip is like sort of excited about planning for his death, and she is obviously melancholy about it, and then starting to think, does she basically relinquish the crown to her son?
Exactly.
And then those conversations, that was not a reflection of having seen Queen Elizabeth die. That was actually already there.
It was already there. And because we couldn't know for sure by the very beginning of the season, if we could count on Olivia Colman and Claire Foy, because it's all related to availability and negotiations, et cetera, et cetera. So there was also a version that one of the scenes that I loved the most that I shot with Stephen is on F10 when the Queen watches the family Super 8 movies, right? That she loads Super 16 or Super 16 movies.
You've got to thread it through. No, thread. Yes, all right, thank you. I think I remember now, thank you.
That scene was originally on the script, and Stephen planned for a few months to develop that scene into his world of magic realism. So can we count on Olivia and Claire? Well, we don't know that for sure. So if we couldn't have Olivia and Claire, I think there was a version of this scene that we're watching now that would involve a little bit of VFX, and the Queen would just basically dive into the screen, and that would become, so she would be surrounded by her memories. So instead of just basically watching a flat screen, she would be embraced by her memories. So there was that kind of a version that Stephen, the VFX team, and myself, we kind of, we tried that version for, like, we had a few meetings. Basically, what would be a version where she could effectively start the sequence like we see now, and then go closer and closer to the screen, and then basically even like almost like a physical version, the screen would embrace her, right? And she would be then surrounded by her own memories. And then we developed that for a few weeks or months or whatever. And then we got the confirmation that Claire Foy and Olivia would be available and interested on being part of the last episode.
Let me ask you, let me just deep dive into some of the technical aspects of shooting this, because interestingly, I just had to deal with this myself, or a 16 millimeter projector and an image on a screen and all that. Is like, how did you attack this? Because, you know, yeah, just talk me through some of the technique.
There's something that is very unique about the screen itself that Stephen came saying, I want to be able to, I want the image to bleed through. So it's not just a flat canvas, it's something it's custom made. So you see even on this shot that you have on still now, that there's a bouncing image. And also you see behind the screen, the image bouncing again on the back wall. So for me, it was kind of I started like challenging that. So why would you want that? And then, of course, the reason you see a little bit later on the same scene, that he wanted to be able to be behind. So now we're behind the screen. So you see, so she's now touching the screen. So there's Imelda's image and her own shadow projected on the screen. So this is the camera behind the screen. So we are now, in a way, part of her memory, right? So we're inside the screen, looking through. And when I realized that that's what Stephen wanted, it just literally like blew my mind. I said, yes, of course we want to be on the other side. And being able to see her hand touching the screen, and her own shadow projected. So that was, of course, as you imagine, a little bit challenging technically. I mean, the actual footage we're projecting now is a 4K. There was a 4K projector underneath the 16 mil projector. So the 16 were just playing. I mean, we played it more like a prop because we wanted to be able to see her loading the image and, struggling a little bit. And then technically, I mean, we needed a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so that's the actual 16 mil beam that you see coming through. That's the 16 mil. And then when you see the screen.
Yeah, when you see over it and you go here, now this is now a digital projector.
It's a digital projector. That's an actual, there's no VFX help here. So that's an actual, it's so bright. There's a mix of 16 and for the backlights, the moments were backlit by the projector.
Yep.
That's 4K. That is 4K probably as working as a backlight. And I think I had a polyboard just bouncing.
Sure, taking some of it back towards her, yeah.
And also a little bit of that animation, so it's not just flat and static. Some of that, the footage that we see are actual archive footage from the Royal family. A little bit of it is something we shot throughout, our seasons, turned black and white and, through the digital projector. So that one, for instance, that's Matt Smith in South Africa. That's footage that we got on season 1. So it's a little bit of everything. The funeral, the King's funeral, that's actual, I think it's BBC footage that we used.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very emotional. And it was so beautiful to watch Imelda. I mean, that was just basically an afternoon. It didn't even take a whole day to shoot. Look, again, you see the image bleeding through.
Yes, and seeing the back screen. Yeah, that's very cool. And did you test different materials?
Yeah. Yes, we did.
I love this image is the best. This image is amazing because like you say, it's like got both the backlight, the double shadow.
And also it's kind of one of the things that I love the most is trying to make our art form that is basically 2D as 3D as possible. So I think that's a good example of like playing the footage, playing lenses, playing surfaces and layers and making it 3D. So there's literally I don't know how many layers that we could embrace here. So the real Imelda, the real projection hitting her back and the screen and her shadow and the image bleeding on the back wall. So it was really exciting. 4 or 5 layers in one single image. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, you shot on Sony still as well for episode 6, right? Yeah.
Sony for 6 seasons, F55s for the first 3, and then Sony Venice for the last 3, 4, 5, and 6. Yeah.
And did you ever, I'm curious because I shot my last film on Sony and really liked it a lot. Did you go to the high ISO a lot?
Yes, the 2500. Yeah, but only literally, I only shot 25-25. So like using the whole range for one scene.
That's it.
Yeah, what I usually do, I used to do like what I used to call the night mode. It was like 2500 sensor mode, but set at 1250. So basically overexposing it a stop. And then so there was only 2 modes, 500 or 2500 set at 1250. So they cut together. They cut together really well because there's like if you overexpose the 2500 sensor, you lose the noise almost completely. So it's very, very smooth. I did. Yeah, I'm using Alexa 35 now, and I kind of embrace a lot the 2560 mode that I absolutely love. And yeah.
Problem, and in the Venice 2, you can go all the way to 3600. Is you get so used to it. You get so used to it that by the time you go back to film or you go back to 800, you're like, oh man, I just lost 2 stops.
That's one thing. The other thing is sometimes you leave the set, whatever, just to have a coffee outside. You come back in and you think like, wow, this is really dark. It's so
And you
funny
think
how
exactly
because basically the sensor can see more than your eyes do. So
that's
you
right.
really hard to adjust. Yes, it really
And
is.
sometimes I wonder, are the actors, particularly somebody like, Imelda Staunton or something like that, are like, where are the lights? Like, are they getting nervous? Like, do I have to show them some light just so they don't feel like it's like, what happened?
Very frequently used, like LED sources at 1%.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Like
no, sometimes you need less than one. Exactly. No, it's a crazy world we live in. Let's talk because you brought up some of this final scene in this episode, which is when Claire Foy comes back and sort of has a conversation about all the sort of things we talked about.
Yeah.
I have one question though. It's interesting because the actresses that have played the Queen over the history of the show are all English.
hmm
And what is this episode you shot after the Queen died, right? The actual
hmm
I wonder if they had a special relationship being English and living, whether it's even a complex relationship with the royal family. And, Imelda has to play, it's like you're witnessing the other queens that played the Queen in The Crown, and they all have a special bond in the same way as they also have a relationship with the real Queen who just passed prior to this episode.
Um,
And I wonder if that
eh,
was infused into it in any way.
well, I know there's a lot of research, that they do. It's about the way the Queen used to speak and the tone and the rhythm. Of course, to play the character. It's hard for me to say how. I think they are all, in a way, royalists by being English. I mean, I think they embrace the culture, they embrace the tradition, the fact that, I mean, even for me, that come from a very different sort of culture, I'd say that having um, a queen that was a very fair and just character, like the real queen was, is kind of an interest. When the world is we live in a world that changes so fastly and constantly, uh, culturally and politically. So having that strong pillar gives you some sort of a sense of stability, I'd say, even when you're a foreigner. So I think they all kind of understand how important that is for their own culture, and the fact that they grew up under her wings in a way. But it's hard for me to tell if they're monarchists in a sense that if they want that to go forever, or if they would embrace a change if that was the case. If eventually the United Kingdom becomes like a republic in a way. I don't really know. I mean, Imelda was just, whatever the term is, she just got the Dame title. She's now Dame Imelda
Oh, wow.
Staunton. So I know she embraces the culture very much so, and she was absolutely 150% proud and happy to be part of that culture. And I think both, even like a funny, skeptical, sarcastic person like Olivia Colman is, I know she's got a lot of respect by the Queen, and I know how much she put into the character in terms of research, in terms of I think we wouldn't be talking about this if it wasn't for Claire Foy's performance on seasons 1 and 2. I mean, I really credit her for the continuation and how much the public in general all over the world embraced. I mean, who knew that in 2015 another royal drama was just gonna go on and be acclaimed, and all these accolades and awards and etc. for season after season after season. I really credit Peter Morgan, of course, because of his writing and how deep his dialogues and were. But like I think Claire Foy kicked it out, or kicked it off, whatever the expression is, in such a high level that it just made sense to continue. And I think we all together as a team, I think we offered like a different sort of perspective onto the royal family. I mean, in terms of humanizing them and making them unbelievable, and like human beings that have issues and dilemmas, and you know, they suffer, they, you know, they have their own their own questions about their own roles in society and in history. So I think it was a different sort of approach onto something that was shown many times before, but there was something specific about Peter's writing, and I'd say Claire Foy's performance on seasons 1 and 2 that just like was, I think, really unique. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously for someone like me, I've seen the Queen my whole life, but I've never seen the Queen at 15 and 17 and 20 and you know, and the history of that. And that's the part that Claire Foy brought to life.
Yeah, that image you have on screen now is it's so moving. I mean, it makes me so I don't know. I love this shot so much, and that scene specifically. Both
We'll
performances.
talk about this. This is that scene in which the ghosts, the history of the Queen in all of their portrayals.
And there she
comes
is, you know,
to life.
that's what I call magic realism. So she jumps ahead of Imelda, and she's there, and she's whispering again on, you know, and then she walks behind, and the focus is on foreground. So it's this voice literally whispering on, you know, Imelda's ear. And it's just like, it's, well, I agree, again, I credit Steven for this beautiful choreography. And now finally they sit face to face. And but even then, Imelda struggles to, you know, look to herself in the look. She doesn't, like, she struggles to turn. It's like she doesn't want to face herself. And then finally, there's a, you know, it's just so moving. It's so beautiful. Yeah. And just talking about, because you asked me this in terms of like, if there is a progression, an evolution on the look and the way I approached my role as the lead DOP for so many episodes and seasons. I don't really, to be really honest with you, I never really challenged myself in terms of like trying to reinvent the wheel. I think I always felt that there was going to be a natural progression, because you move from decades to decades to you. So there's a natural progression in terms of like embracing new sets, embracing new costumes and props and cars and furnitures and locations. So I always felt that I could somehow kind of stick to this, to my, what I call my realistic approach, you know, the heavily relying on practicals and my sources coming from outside the window in, light diffusion, vintage lenses. And so it was not like, not like I had a Bible that I wrote on season 1 that I wanted to, stick to. But in a way, the privilege also working with the same production designer throughout 6 seasons and being offered, by Martin Childs, like a natural visual progression in terms of how he changed his sets and his set dressing. And again, the costume designers, a little bit of makeup as well, because you move throughout time and makeup changes. I think if you go back now and rewatch seasons 1 and 2, they probably feel, much softer than season 6, because they were more romantic in a way, in terms of coverage, more classic, less cutty, less pacey. So there is a natural progression in the editing as well. And, I think we talked about this before. We shot the first 2 seasons on old Cooke Panchros. They're really warm lenses and super, super soft. Then we moved on seasons 3 and 4 to Zeiss Super Speeds. Very soft lenses, but a little bit more contemporary. Then on seasons 5 and 6, we moved to Cooke S4s, much sharper if you compare to the Zeiss Super Speeds and the Cooke Panchros, but less sharp than the most advanced Cook series now, at the S7s, for instance. They're really sharper than the S4s. But, that was not like it didn't feel like a big effort for me. It was like more like a natural sort of evolution. I think there is a different approach on Ep3, on season 6 specifically, because of approaching Diana's last days and the stress she was under because of the paparazzis always following her. So I think we try to embrace a little bit more like a little. I mean, if I can say observational, I think there is a more observational element, specifically on Ep3. The use of long lenses, the fact that we wanted to be a little bit more far away from our main characters and embracing. So instead of, doing close-ups on 50 and 65 mils, we did on 85s and 100s and 135. So there was a little bit more like a physical distance in a way that we embraced exactly. So you see, there's always like a little bit of a kind of a more voyeuristic approach, specifically on Ep6, and there was on Ep3, sorry, and there was a very conscious decision that we embraced.
Well, because of course it's about her public exposure, right? It's about the paparazzi and it's about always being watched, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, a lot of the season is about that, even with Harry later and his uniform and when he goes to the Halloween party and he's got the Nazi on.
Very much.
It's about the paparazzi and the sort of shining a light on that this family is always being watched is a huge part of the whole season.
It is. I mean, and I think if you just address that theme, it is also throughout 6 seasons is how much they lost their privacy, because in the 50s and 60s with this mythical family living inside a castle that you occasionally would see in big ceremonies, and then throughout recent history, just their lives just got more and more and more exposed. And I think for us, in terms of like what we showed on The Crown, I think that Ep6 is probably the peak of that sort of stress of the complete loss of privacy.
Yeah,
and how badly it ended up.
I want to finish this one thing because where this final scene in episode 10 goes and really completes this cycle of her looking at her own mortality and looking at the history of her life, as well as giving the audience a sense of like the history of the show. I was incredibly moved I was surprised at how moved I was by this episode and by the whole season.
And Larry, that was the last day of principal photography.
I wondered because I thought, wow, how do you do this out of order? But then I thought maybe it's this shot, of course. It's like, well, what about their availability? I had the same question you said.
Exactly. And the fact that we didn't have to use any special effects or VFX, they were physically there on the day, the 3 of them. It was really, really special. I mean, it was a joy for the 3 actresses to be together. I mean, they love each other. You could really see how much the younger ones respect and revere Imelda. It was just really beautiful to watch. This literally was the penultimate shot we did, and the big nave one, the next one, it was the last shot we did. And then there was, flowers for everybody and champagne. And of course, technically, there's always a little bit of, additional photography that we do like a few weeks later. But that was the last shot we did. And I remember, I was very specific because I could never, even on a big show like The Crown, and that's a massive cathedral that we used only for that sequence in York, in Northern England. And I think I couldn't find a way to actually have those shots. So I was very specific about, being or shooting that shot, whatever, Larry. It was like 5:30 p.m.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like praying for a sunny day. And I mean, we managed. I was so lucky, and we managed. We had to really rush to be able to be in position for that shot. I think I remember. So this was probably in April, early April, and still like, this is springtime in the UK, of course. And yeah, I remember like we scouted that location weeks and weeks earlier, and the Sunseeker and Where's the Sun at 5 o'clock. I mean, how can I count on a sunny day? But luckily, it was a sunny day, so we managed to. It was just really like a dream coming true.
Because let me ask you a question. If it was an overcast day, you probably still shoot, right? And then maybe you're asking for VFX help. You're like, it's not, yeah, probably, right? It's like, even on a show like this, to say, let's come back tomorrow or let's wait for a sunny day is an impossibility, right?
It is impossible. Yeah, we had 2.5 days, I think 4 days in total. So I think art department had a day and a half to prep. I mean, the return when you see the very young queen, the teenage queen.
Yeah, this one, right?
Just out of curiosity, because that is a big choir section at York Cathedral. So that's all real behind Imelda. And there's a wall that art department built just to make the York Cathedral a little bit smaller, because the Windsor Cathedral, where that's supposed to happen, is not that big.
So the wall behind.
The wall behind is a fake wall. Yeah. So they had a day, I think, to build the wall. Of course, the wall came in sections already, pretty much in good shape. So they had to build the wall and break the wall. Anyway, just to make that section of the cathedral a little bit smaller. Everything else is absolutely 100% real. The choir section and the big nave. But anyway, so they had a day and a half to prep the cathedral, and we had I think it was 2.5 days to shoot everything, including Charles' wedding ceremony and the final sequence.
Wow. And how are you, like, in these sensitive locations? You have sensitive requirements in terms of what you're able to do and what you're able to bring in? Are you using balloons? Are you using sort of big units far away? Like, what's your attack?
You can't absolutely touch the walls. I mean,
right.
Yeah, you can probably just, contradict it. You can probably use the walls just to tie the balloon cords.
Right.
But you can have lights outside. You can have machines outside. That's all fine. They're not that pressured about the stained glass, so you can light through. But inside, just balloons. Or if you want to bounce lights on the actual walls, you can. But you cannot rig absolutely anything inside. So it's just balloons and lights coming from machines outside. Yeah.
And all right, well, let's do this, because I know we have limited time, but I want to just go here for a second, right? So if we go and we look at all the Crown and all the shots that Adriano Goldman has shot throughout the years, okay? And then let's just do this. Let's search by most popular, because it's an interesting experiment, because these are the shots that ShotDeck users have chosen to sort of reference or use as inspiration or whatever it is. And I'm curious if what they bring back as far as memories. Obviously, this one here from episode 3 of season 4 is a very beautiful one. This is one of my favorite images.
My work with Ben Karen, I have to really, praise him. He's probably the youngest of all directors that I worked with on The Crown. And we did a few episodes together, including, I'd say, like 3 of my favorites, the Churchill's Portrait on season 1, and then Barrow on season 2, and then Fairy Tale on season 4. I absolutely love those episodes, and I got nominations for with him as well, and it's just like I love all the episodes I did with Ben. There's that you see at the top right. That's a frame from Moo Moo episode I did with Alex Gabassi on season 5, a good friend of mine as well that I did a couple episodes with.
That Moo, that whole season was beautiful because I never the one of the revelations of the of all both seasons 5 and 6 was the Fayed backstory and all of that. Because of course, again, my experience with knowing that she died in a tunnel with Dodi Fayed and not really knowing the history of Mohammed Al Fayed and his relationship with the royals, I thought was one of the best things about the show is that it's not just
Yeah.
incredibly moving, but it's like a history lesson.
Just to mention, the frame where you see young Charles, that's the rugby scene where that
This
one.
one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is Paterfamilias. It's one of the episodes I did with Stephen. And I'd say, Larry, that is in terms of like, I think in all aspects, budget, scale, scope, ambition, I think that's the biggest episode we've done. It's so, if you remember, it's the parallel story between
Yeah.
Charles' education and Philip's education.
Yep.
So there's all the flashbacks we shot in Budapest, and the intercuts and the parallel stories. It's so rich, and it's so. I absolutely love that. Stephen won an Emmy Award, like a directing Emmy Award, because for that episode. It's just one of my favorites as well. And again, Barrow, you see the Red Room, with it's just like.
Well, it's interesting because when you look at what ShotDeck users are referencing, because it's always an interesting thing to see. It also speaks to the two things that are most present in the show, which are like obviously really distinctive compositional.
Are these all frames for episodes I shot?
I mean, yeah, they should be, because they're I cross-reference The Crown and Adriano. So like these are specific to your imagery, but it's also it's both these
What an honor.
incredible close-ups, but also scope, right? The show had massive scope, right? You look at the locations that were shot in, and
Diana watching the ballet, it's just
well, this and from Fairy Tale, of course, when she's skating through the
and the super emblematic thing, the Diana on the jetty,
this one.
That one.
Well, this is at the end of this episode, right? Where she's
step 2.
She's literally on a precipice, right? Like her life is.
Well, and that's, of course, that is a tribute to a very famous image of Diana in Saint-Tropez. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's really a wonder when you look back at, like, this is the history of the last 8 years of a lot of your photography. And the sort of variety.
Wow, thanks for this. Thank you.
Oh, I always loved, because it's like, well, okay, these are like have been culled by the millions and millions of searches of The Crown and what people are engaging with in various ways, right? It could just be in the multitude of ways that they need a beautiful example of lighting in a restaurant or an amazing close-up,
Look at that.
With this sort of shaped lighting. Or like scope shots, or this sort of, something like this, which is a very cool, this just coming into the shot, this sort of double cut, the double cut that happens when you come into this shot, I thought was really beautiful. And again, like her life with Dodi at this point is a dream, right? I love that scene when he asks, what do you like about me? It's like my wallet and my hands, all of it.
But it's funny when you put that, let's call it mosaic, there's also consistency throughout 6 seasons. I mean, of course, there's differences, but there's also something that is very familiar that you can identify as the kind of what we can call the Crown look in a way, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
It's the kind of, the single source philosophy, the less is more, the use of practicals, the sort of use the try to as much as I can to use depth and pull focus and use, it's just perspective.
The silhouettes against the shears, I would say, is very distinctive. Crown.
Yeah, the symmetry. Yeah,
that's right. The inserts, the use of inserts.
Yeah, there's there's shots from behind the flares.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see the consistency for sure. And the use of these locations. And
Yeah.
obviously a lot were also these incredible sets that were built, but the fact that you guys went to such spectacular places
Wow.
and shot there. And this, of course, looking out a window will forever be a shot from The Crown. If I ever had to do a shot from outside a window of looking into it, I would say, oh yeah, we could just reference The Crown. There's so many of those shots in there. People standing in front of windows and looking out them. So this is a very classic The Crown shot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with the practical, the coolest shears and the silhouette between them.
Look, I feel very privileged. I don't really want to sound pretentious in any way, but I feel so very much awarded. The fact that this is my 6th nomination in 6 seasons. I mean, how could I possibly imagine that season after season, the Academy, the audience, the public in general, they would just embrace and keep embracing and giving us, this attention and accolades, and it's just, it's a very, very special. I think the word is journey. It's just like a collection of good memories that I'm going to carry with me, for the rest of my life. And it really changed my way of working. It's everything.
Well, speak to that, because that was my sort of last question, was this sort of a 2-part, which is, over these last 8 years of shooting The Crown, what did you learn most about yourself as an artist, but also what did you learn about shooting? Like, what did you learn, and how does that change? Like, from the first pilot, the first episode, those first 2 episodes to the last episode, I know you spoke to sort of the fact that you tried. It's an incredible amount of restraint not to sort of be feeling like you needed to reinvent yourself, but instead keep a really consistent tone. And you see that in those images we just had up. But speak to, like, just what do you take away as like a, from the experience of the 8 years?
Well, I mean, definitely, again, coming from a small industry that I come from in South America and Brazil, of course I learned how to play with, big stars and big budget, big machinery, big toys, as I call them, but also to be free-minded, to be flexible, and ask the director first about his vision. What kind of trying to respond first. Although I absolutely loved to be called the lead DOP for such an acclaimed series, being called by Peter Morgan like, the keeper of the flame, it made me very, very proud. But also, it never made me I don't know. I think the word is arrogant about it. I think I kept my mind free. Also, every time you start working with a new director, you absolutely have to also protect their work. I'm not there to direct the episodes. I'm there to help them to go through the first days and give them confidence. So this is a big show, but of course, there's a few rules to follow, but also you're very welcome to bring your own taste and flavor and approach to the show. I think one of the things that I really kind of appreciate is prepping. I really learned how interesting and so, because I used to be anxious about start shooting. I want to start shooting. I want to start shooting. I want to start shooting. That's what I know, right? I know how to shoot. Like, the long preps that was always offered to me, season after season after season, gave me this interesting sort of approach in terms of like using the prep time to massage, to chew all the information, to prep, to work with different departments, to visit locations 3, 4, 5 times. It basically, I think the more you prep, the more you can improvise on the day, the more flexible you somehow become, the more stressed you are with, for instance, well, I was dreaming about a sunny day. I didn't get one. So I'm not going to just moan about it. You know, let's just embrace this and be flexible. And I remember like one of the most interesting compliments that I ever got from Stephen was that, you know, I get frustrated sometimes if I have to change my mind or change the coverage or rethink the coverage. But he said, but you never get stuck to it. You know, I can see your face, I can see your frustration, but in 2 minutes, you just jump out of it and you find a solution and you just embrace the new challenge. And I think that's part of the fact that you feel confident about the information you're carrying with you, about the story, about the people you're working with, about the characters, the locations you know so well. So, I mean, there's always a plan B. I think prepping. I think that's something I really, I learned to love, I think, throughout. And also that it shouldn't be about the cinematography. It's about the story you're telling. And then you make an effort to make it beautiful, right? But like, I don't know. Now that I saw all those frames together, it really gave me a really interesting sense of, I don't know, joy and pride. And it was really intense. You know, 8 years of my life working with so many different artists. You have to learn something, right? From all of them.
Yeah, well, you guys should all be very proud of yourself and the whole team because, as I've mentioned before, that's a super high bar for what's possible in cinema, television, film. It doesn't matter. It's just such good storytelling, and it's exquisitely told, beautifully constructed, and it'll always serve as like the highest bar of television.
And I think we all dream now. I mean, Peter, Steve, and myself, you know, the team, the designers, if we can ever work together again, you know, that would be amazing, right? Because we know each other so well. And I think it would be just another dream, you know, for all of us.
I'm sure it'll happen.
Yeah.
I think it will. How do you not get the team back the band back together?
We should, yeah.
Well, Adriano, again, enjoy the rest of your show. It sounds like it's going to be a good one. I just keep doing what you do, man. Take chances and
thank you
do
so
your
much.
thing. I'll be
Thank
watching
you.
for sure.
Thank you all for the opportunity for this, you know, again and again, having these amazing chats. Yeah.
I love it. I love that it's there for people to watch forever. So there you go.
Count on me, Larry. Always.
You got it. All right, we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Larry.